nothing beats the charm of New York Central steam locomotives. Whenever it's brought up, you think of the iconic and stylized yet flashy looking Hudsons, the flexible and robust Mohawks, and the Chads that are the Niagaras. And probably Mikados and Pacifics, but whatever. It's quite fair to say that throughout their existence, the New York Central had quite the wide range of steam locomotives, from humble yard switchers to common 10-wheelers, streamlined beauties, weird-looking tank engines, slow-switching Malleys, ugly pieces of shit, O10Os, you name it. But today, we'll be spotlighting two locomotives that served the New York Central for many years, operate on a specific part of the railroad's network, and survived all the way until the end of steam. But what kind of locomotives would even fit that bill? To set the stage, the Canada Southern Railway, otherwise known as CASO, was first formed on February 28, 1868, as a way to connect rail service from Fort Erie, Niagara Falls, to out west around Windsor and Courtright, with the railway headquarters being based in St. Thomas, which was once dubbed Railway City due to its once high presence of multiple railway companies. Anyways, the CASO had a locomotive shops based in St. Thomas, which is where two locomotives were built in the summer of 1900, in the form of these 460s. The two 10-wheelers were initially numbered 449 and 454, and were built 3 months apart from each other. For specifications, they were fitted with Stevenson valve gear, a wheelbase of 48 feet, a total weight of 236,800 pounds, a boiler pressure of 180 psi, a driver diameter of 68 inches, firebox area of 137.10 square feet, with a grate area of 28.50 square feet, and a tractive effort of 23,630 pounds. Which made these 10-wheelers pretty simple in all honesty. Not too different from other designs around the time. The so-called F-82 class totaled 5 examples, but the CASO rostered 46 10-wheelers in total. While many were constructed at Schenectady, a handful of them were built at the St. Thomas shops, which included the two aforementioned 10-wheelers. 4 years later, in 1905, the CASO would become a part of the Michigan Central Railroad as part of a 99-year lease, with the 10-wheelers gaining new numbers in return. And then by 1929, it was then subleased to the beloved New York Central, where the CASO would be classified as the St. Clair subdivision. And within their ownership of the New York Central, the 10-wheelers were once again renumbered to 880 and 881, being the very few 10-wheelers to receive new numbers. The antiquated pair would continue operating across the St. Clair subdivisions well into the 1930s, working passenger and freight trains out of St. Thomas, alongside some of the branch lines around Fort Erie and Niagara Falls. And while many of the former CASO 10-wheelers were being reassigned or flat out retired within the 1930s and even the 1940s, the two 10-wheelers continued on even past the Second World War, which for machines of this status was quite surprising. It was also around 1948 when they received their last renumberings, now becoming 1290 and 1291, and they also gained the title of being the last CASO 10-wheelers in active service, and among the oldest engines operating on the New York Central. By the 1950s, dieselization was sweeping the nation and every railroad was buying them en masse. The New York Central included. As we know, this saw steam locomotives being thrown into retirement, and by 1955, only 44 steam locomotives were listed as active on the New York Central. And you wanna guess which locomotives were still in active service around this time? Yeah, they survived. It is genuinely surprising how Pacifics, Mikados, and even Hudsons were being retired around this time, which were far more modern machines, yet these two 10-wheelers are somehow surviving against more modern power? It's because of this alone that some rail fans would try and photograph them whenever they could during these dying days of steam. By this point, the 10-wheelers had been reassigned to the Courtright branch, running 62 miles from St. Thomas to the Chesapeake and Ohio interchange in Courtright. You see, the line had fallen into decay and couldn't support the weight of modern power, hence why the older 10-wheelers were kept around, since they were far more lightweight compared to other locomotives that were assigned in that area. They were also given auxiliary water tenders due to the removal of many water towers in the early 1950s. And this is mostly prevalent in the many photographs of these 10-wheelers, which showcase their auxiliary water tenders. And this is how they kept on going, and as a result of this, they gained some traction by a few rail fans that saw them out. Iconic rail photographer Jim Shaughnessy had this to say on the 10-wheelers when he went out to see them in 1955.
It was like entering a time warp to see old locomotives still in steam. Hardly anything had changed on the 2460s in their 56-year lifetime. No stoker or power reverse, just hand-fired. 73-ton machines with slide valves, 64-inch driving wheels, and 501 half-inch tall smokestacks.
However, these two locomotives could not live on forever, as by 1957, their time was running up, as 1291 was the first of the pair to be retired, bowing out on January 15th, with 1290 holding out for a few more months. It wasn't until April 27th, 1957, when 1290 was finally retired. By that time, it was just 6 days before the last run of a steam locomotive on the New York Central, when a 282 ran a transfer run around Cincinnati, closing the chapter for the New York Central steam era. After serving 57 years across 3 different companies and likely racking up hundreds of thousands of miles, the 10-wheelers had finally been put to rest. You would think that the New York Central would consider preserving such antiquated machines. They pretty much were a favorite amongst rail fans, and
both of them were scrapped.
what? You were expecting them to be preserved? I mean, if this is the same railroad that scrapped every one of their Hudsons and Niagaras, like hell they'd even preserve 10-wheelers. Besides, we all know that Alfred E. Perlman was not really the best when it came to steam preservation.
What? Bro, what are you talking about?
Now, this wasn't because he quote-unquote hated steam as some people said. You gotta consider the financial state of the New York Central during that time. Basically, any scrap money that came from retiring steam locomotives would have helped the New York Central financially. Hence why a lot of steam locomotives got scrapped and why there's very few representations of New York Central steam engines in preservation. Regardless, in spite of attempts to set aside one of them, they ultimately fell to the wayside, being reduced to nothing but memories. And as for the Courtright branch itself, it only lasted 3 years after their retirements before the branch line was abandoned and torn up in 1960. These two 10-wheelers stood out in the New York Central, not only for being Canadian built, but for such dated machines being built at the beginning of the 20th century. They survived all the way up until the end of steam, providing those that witnessed them a glimpse into the past, at how steam power once served for the Canada Southern Railway. The Michigan Central locomotive shops, the same place where the 10-wheelers were built, would stand for many decades and eventually became home for the Elgin County Railway Museum. This would be home to some preserved pieces of rolling stock, but also many artifacts from St. Thomas's railways. Unfortunately though, earlier in January of this year, the museum would close its doors indefinitely due to structure issues inside the building. The museum right now is looking for as much support as possible during these times, and your support could be greatly appreciated. A link to the museum's website will be provided in the description down below, where you can donate and support them in any capacity, whether it's a one-time donation or if you want to do weekly, monthly, or yearly perhaps. Even if you can't send over money or are not willing to donate, spread the word around to your friends, family, pet dog, Discord moderators, crypto scammers, etc., and hopefully they can pitch in. This is more than just keeping some preserved trains intact. This is keeping a part of Canadian railway history and a part of St. Thomas's heritage alive that's left an impact for the town's community. Again, go and visit ecrm.ca to donate and support one of Southern Ontario's finest railway museums. And hopefully with your support, they can open their doors once again and keep telling the history of Canadian railways alive for years to come.